Hello, I'm Jim Sciutto, and today for Wolf Blitzer, it is 1 p.m. here in Washington. Wherever you're watching from around the world, thanks very much for joining us. A new denial. President Trump disputing Michael Cohen's claim, as first reported here on CNN, that the president knew of and approved of the Trump Tower meeting with the Russians before that meeting happened. Joining me now is former federal prosecutor Seth Waxman, CNN political analyst Karin Demerjen, and CNN national security analyst Mark Mazzetti. Mark, who also works for a newspaper called the New York Times. Mark, this is an unusual way for a willing witness to present himself to a special counsel in public, in effect. Is this something that the special counsel would take seriously as an offer? Because I imagine, listen, if Mueller was interested in his knowledge of this meeting, which would be natural because of Cohen's proximity to the president, wouldn't he have already reached out to him?
I mean, it does appear that Cohen is actively seeking a deal, and you're right. If Mueller acts in ways that sometimes are mysterious, but they're very purposeful, and so clearly this would be something he would want to know. This has been. Chris brought me back to this, over a year ago, this long and painful weekend of trying to figure out what the truth on this meeting was. And where we ended up was that they, knew it was coming from the Russian government. They knew it was dirt. This big unanswered question, of course, still is, did Donald Trump know? And that's why the Cohen story is very big, if true. If Cohen did have knowledge and he can prove it, it's a huge story. So that's really the big missing piece of this story so far.
And I should remind viewers that in our story about this, Cohen claims that he was in the room when President, or then candidate Trump, was informed about this meeting by his son, Donald Trump Jr., so he's claiming firsthand knowledge of that. Karin, Michael Cohen has been, it seems, asked about this before in an environment where it matters, because he appeared before House and Senate committees. Now, it's CNN's reporting that someone with knowledge of his House testimony has told us that he did not testify in that context, that the president knew of this meeting in advance. Do we know if he was, do you know in your reporting if he was specifically asked about it? And what problem would that pose for Michael Cohen if in that environment where your testimony is required by law to be truthful, and in another environment, what does that do to his legal situation, but also to his credibility? Well,
that's exactly the word I was going to use, is that there's a credibility problem here when you're telling one story to one group of people who have a legal reason to expect you to tell the truth, and then another story when your back is more up against the wall because you're now a subject of investigation yourself. Look, Michael Cohen is not the first person in this entire affair to change his story. He's not the first person to give an incomplete or incorrect record of events to House and Senate investigators as part of this story. We saw that happen when Eric Prince's testimony kind of went back and forth as well. So that is not good, but it's not unique in this whole narrative. The question is, though, really, does he have proof of these things? Is it just his word? Because then, of course, there's a question of how much weight that word has, given that his story has changed, and he does have his own problems right now to think about. But he and his lawyers seem to be saying that, no, they do have, if not proof of this specific thing, then tapes of other interactions that would go towards establishing his credibility. And the question is really, is it enough to meet, well, to convince the special counsel if there's something there he's trying to convince him of, and also to meet a legal threshold, which is what they need if they're actually going to take this case forward and have it go and apply to anybody else. I
should know that in our reporting, it's our understanding that Michael Cohen does not have an audio recording of this meeting to corroborate it. Seth, criminal defense attorney, former federal prosecutor, you've been on both sides of the legal case. Let's talk about the president's legal liability here, because it's two paths, is it not? Because it's both on foreknowledge of a meeting that would involve illegal foreign help to his campaign, but also on trying to cover up that meeting potentially later, right? So that's two avenues of potential legal liability?
Sure, that's the obstruction on the one hand and the underlying crime on the first part. But with regards to that underlying crime, it's always been my opinion at the heart of the Mueller investigation is this quid pro quo, this offer of dirt for Hillary in exchange for reducing or eliminating sanctions on Russians. And if you look at the federal bribery statute, that's what the prosecutors use to combat public corruption most often. When he was inaugurated or sworn into office, we can all agree that he's subject to federal bribery law. But if you look at that law specifically, what it says is it applies much, much earlier. It applies as of the date the person is nominated or officially notified that they're going to be nominated. That is in the heart of this time frame when the Trump Tower meeting occurred and all this other material. And the other big point about federal bribery, it is a 15-year maximum prison sentence associated with it, and it also can be a predicate to RICO and other charges. All the charges we've heard about thus far are campaign finance violations, conspiracy to defraud the U.S. Those are 2- and 5-year maximum sentences. The federal prosecutors use hammers to go after people in the inside of conspiracies, like the Jared Kushners, like the John Juniors. So it's always been my opinion that it's this federal bribery law that's at the heart, and now Mr. Cohen putting Mr. Trump at the center of this quid pro quo kind of lends evidence to that underlying legal theory.
Mark, it struck me that listening to the president's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, last night, that he floated about 15 different defenses on this, right? On the one hand, he said that, yeah, a meeting took place, but other people will contradict Cohen on this. On the other hand, he said, all I have to do is create a reasonable doubt. On the other hand, he said he has no credibility, whereas 2 months ago, he told George Stephanopoulos that he was an honorable lawyer, so a little inconsistency there. Is it your sense that this White House is nervous about what Michael Cohen knows about the president's activities on this and other issues?
Well, in this case, you know, they might need to be nervous, right? Because if, in fact, Cohen can prove that Trump had foreknowledge of this meeting, then it's significant in the narrative. And the narrative of a case, if Mueller were to build one of possible collusion, you know, whatever crime you want to call it, the mantra from the White House has been, there's no collusion, there's no collusion, there's no collusion. The reason why the Trump Tower meeting, for people who have lost the thread in this whole thing, the reason why the Trump Tower meeting is important is because it shows that the top tier of the Trump campaign wanted to collude. Yeah. They knew that there was a Russian government attempt to give dirt on Hillary Clinton, and they were disappointed that it didn't deliver. So it's significant, and if the president knew about it, it would be significant.
It's a great point, is it not, Karen? And we were saying this a little earlier, is that, you know, and Trump himself has said this, is that, listen, any campaign would want this kind of dirt. They're kind of defending what they wanted the meeting to be, and then saying at the same time, well, it didn't turn out to give us what we wanted, and therefore, there's, you know, there's no crime here. You know, there's no collusion here.
It's almost a philosophical legal question, right? If you had the intent to commit a crime, but you didn't actually do it, how bad is that really when you're talking about both a legal process and public opinion? And they both matter, especially when you're in an election year, which granted the president's not on the ballot, but the Republican Party kind of is in Congress right now for whether it's going to have full power on Capitol Hill or not.
Well, I'm sure this Republican Party would much prefer the economic figures to be the story rather than this, but it keeps going. Seth, Karen, Mark Mazzetti, thanks very much.